Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, which is all about calorie counting to being calorie conscious. So you're probably thinking, what on earth is this? And I'm going to talk to you about it. So this is for people that have been actively counting calories as part of probably in a fat loss phase or what we call a maintenance phase, which is when you're trying to maintain that lower fat loss position. And some people might want or have been counting calories for many weeks. Some might have been doing it for many months, and some people that I've even come across have actually done it for many years. Now, you might want to stay calorie counting, and that is absolutely fine. But a lot of people want to move away from calorie counting, but don't know how to. And this is the theory that I would try to apply to it if you're trying to move away. And I call it the calorie conscious approach. So let's explore this further. So to start with, I just want to touch on calorie counting and look at the pros and the cons of it. So if you're choosing to move away from it, you understand kind of why you might be moving away. So the pros of calorie counting is that it's firstly a really great education tool. And that's why I would encourage most people to do it, at least in the short term, at some stage during their fat loss journey, because it helps you understand the amount of calories that are in every food. And that is all about learning and understanding. And if you're in a position that you're trying to lose fat for the long term, you really do need to understand the context of how calories in versus calories out affect your fat loss or fat gain. If you've been on any other type of random diets before that generally under some kind of name, they probably haven't even talked to you about calories. They've talked to you about all these different theories and categorizing foods as good as bad and different sins and different values and stuff. But ultimately, your fat loss success is going to come down to your calories. So this is why calorie counting can be really important, because it actually gives you the knowledge and understanding of where calories come from and what foods have more. I often find people that calorie counting can also feel quite empowered to make choices, because they suddenly then know how many calories are in foods and they can make choices based on what they want and be confident in choosing foods that they know actually are helping them towards their goals, or at least not negatively impacting their goals. Whereas some people aren't sure how many calories are in stuff, or they don't know whether something is fattening or not fattening. They can be really kind of anxious and worried about whether it's impacting their progress or not. The other good thing about calories is it's very quantifiable data. So when you are trying to progress or regress things in regards to speeding up fat loss or slowing down fat loss, or if you've hit a plateau, trying to figure out how to move forward with that plateau, is counting calories gives you some data to work from. And when you've got that data, you can stretch it. So if you know you've been eating at 16, 1700 calories and you haven't been losing weight, you know that you can drop those calories, and technically that should then create the weight loss if that's making a deficit. But if you have no idea how many calories you are currently eating, you have no idea how to move from that number. And the final pro I put in regards to calorie counting is in regards to food freedom. And I said not labeling things as good and bad. So instead of, I said, a lot of these diet approaches where every food is categorized and you can't have so many of one thing because it takes you over a certain limit or something. When you're calorie counting, you kind of got that full freedom. So a lot of people kind of had this theory that you can eat whatever you want as long as it fits your calories. And there is some theory to that, and some evidence that does work. Now, whether that's good for your health is a whole different matter. And if you're going to feel satisfied after those meals is a whole different matter. But when we actually look at kind of actually losing body fat, technically speaking, you probably could eat any types of food you want, and lose weight if you wanted to. So by just putting calories attached to food, you can then make decisions based on the value of calories in that food and whether you want them, not worrying about whether it is good or bad for you. Now, that's the pros, and it's a lot of the reason why people will do calorie counting, and it's something I said I will suggest for people in the short term. Now, the cons of calorie counting, which might be why you might want to move away from it, is it can become quite obsessive. Now, this quite often comes down to you as an individual and your behaviors. Some people have quite obsessive personalities and they get hooked on stuff very quickly. Some people get hooked on stuff, but from an insecurity point of view, so they're so worried that they're going to suddenly stop making progress, they cling on to calorie counting as the safety net, because they think if they're doing that, they're making progress the whole time. And that can become unhealthy in regards to the obsession with it. And it can, in some extreme cases, lead to disordered eating. And often it can be quite disguised disordered eating, rather than something really obvious that people find. But if you're watching this and you find like you're making every choice of meal based on how many calories in it, and you won't eat something until you plugged it into your tracking device, there probably is starting to become a little bit of disordered kind of thought process there. If you've got no freedom at all, and it's actually creating some anxiety within you. Calorie counting is a very simplified way of actually looking at calories, and this is a little bit of a con when it comes to it, because not all calories work the same once they enter the body. So calorie counting is all about what food and what you're putting into your mouth, but it doesn't actually look at what your body does with that food. So not all food is going to turn into energy that your body can use, which basically means how much of it is metabolized. So whole grain, unprocessed food is going to have a lot lower amount of calories getting consumed to your body than something that's highly processed. So calorie counting, although it's accurate, it's probably the most accurate measurement of kind of fat loss we can use. It is also very simplified that we just look at calories. So another alternative is what we call macro counting. So instead of counting the calories, you count how many grams of protein and fats and carbohydrates you're having, because those three items break down differently. That gives you probably a little bit better chance, but it's far more complicated, and I would never want you to go into that. But understanding, I said, just because on your app it says you've eaten 1,500 calories doesn't mean your body has actually taken out 1,500 calories worth of energy from that food. It will vary, and unfortunately a calorie counting app is never going to be that precise. What else is there cons? So touch on that, it kind of neglects the nutritional value of food. So again, it's not only about kind of how your body processes foods, but it's also what else your body's getting in regards to vitamins and minerals and all those nutrients, whether macro or micronutrients. And calorie counting doesn't do that. Now, from a fat loss perspective, as I said, a lot of it still comes down to the amount of energy that you're taking on board. But from a health point of view, and from a kind of feeling of wellness, and from providing your body all the tools that it needs to function effectively, calorie counting doesn't take in any of that on the surface level. Constantly monitoring and calculating calories can cause a lot of stress for people, and it can take a lot of enjoyment away from eating. So whether that's just because the actual admin of it kind of detracts from the enjoyment of the food, or whether it's the worry that a certain type of food isn't now going to fit into your calorie target, or you're looking at menus to go to restaurants and find that there's nothing on the menu that fits in your calorie target, that level of stress and anxiety and worry sometimes can be quite a negative in regards to calorie counting. And the other thing it can often do is actually take away a lot of the sensations of eating mindfully. So in regards to kind of tuning into your hunger levels and tuning into how full you're feeling and tuning into your energy levels and what your body's asking for, if you're very much just kind of looking at it from a numbers perspective and you're eating to fit within your calorie goal, whether that's eating more than your body's asking for at the time because you've got the calorie surplus, got calorie allowance, shall I say, to do so, or whether you're under eating quite significantly because you're trying to stay within the goal, and maybe not take into account kind of differences in your bodies depending on the energy needs that day. So if you've had a higher energy expenditure one day, your body's probably asking for more energy, more calories in, but you ignore those sensations and those feelings because you're trying to stick into a limited calorie target. So there, as I said, sometimes the cons, and those cons are big enough that I would say for a lot of people, calorie counting for the long term is probably not your best option. But as I said, for the short term, there is a lot of benefits I touched on above. So what is the difference when I'm talking about calorie counting to, I think it's a terminology I've put together myself. I like the alliteration, calorie conscious. So calorie conscious is, no, let's do it the other way around. So I've used an analogy of driving, okay? Calorie counting is like basically always using a sat nav. So the sat nav is kind of guiding you, directing you, making your decisions for you, and you're kind of just following what it says. Especially people that are kind of really infiltrated into the kind of calorie counting world, where they're using their tracking app to kind of make a lot of meal decisions for them. That really is like the sat nav. They're kind of just following the direction it's going. It's often kind of the quickest, the fastest route, the most efficient route, not necessarily the most enjoyable route. But if I kind of expand that analogy further, obviously if the battery on that sat nav run out, if you don't have your phone, you don't have your tracking device, people often feel very lost. They don't feel like they've got control of the situation at all. Being calorie conscious is, I like to describe as using a map. So you are aware of where you're going, you're aware of the direction that you need to travel, but it's not as accurate. And when we're looking at calories, then it's about kind of having awareness of how many calories are in each different foods. You're aware of how many calories your body needs, and you're trying to match those two numbers up. So you're still heading towards your goal, which might be a fat loss goal, but you're not following a very strict instructions on your sat nav. You're taking a more guided, rough direction from your map. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to come back to that analogy later, because I love an analogy. So why switch to being calorie conscious? So we're going to touch on some of them probably off that pros and cons list we did earlier. So it can help you maintain your fat loss or maintenance goals, whatever you're trying to achieve, for the long term. Okay, so let's take myself, for example. I very intermittently will sometimes track calories. Most of the time I'm not, but what I am is I'm very conscious of the calories in my food. And that is why I managed to stay at the weight that I am, because I always know roughly the amount of calories I need to consume. I know roughly how many calories in each meal. Some of that comes from practice that I'll talk about later, but it's me knowing that if I want to stay at the weight that I am with the fat percentage that I am, I need to be eating in a similar calorie range on average consistently. And that's what being calorie conscious is. Being calorie conscious can really increase food enjoyment. It's that sense of freedom. It's that sense of stress being released. You're giving yourself a little bit of room for error, a little bit of a buffer. You have consciousness of knowing what you're doing, which makes you feel in control without obsessing about the numbers and feeling out of control. It allows being conscious about calories. What I like to say is gives you a very evidence-based decision making. So I think, prime example now, calories on menus has become something that's come in the last couple of years. So most larger cafes or restaurants now, and takeaways and stuff, will now have to have calories on them. Now, when I'm now trying to choose a meal that I want to make sure is kind of in line with my goals in regards to keeping the body that I've got, I have now evidence to make my decision off. So I wasn't just trying to second guess what meals would have what calories in. I now know, and some of them are really surprising. A lot of the big salads that are on menus, you might think of the low calorie kind of options, but actually the menus are now showing that they've actually got more calories in than a burger and chips sometimes. That is evidence-based decision making, because I'm very conscious about the calories. Now, often I find clients that work for me on coaching, until they start coaching, until they start getting understanding what calories are, they've actually even been oblivious to that number that's been on the menus that's been in front of them. And it's only when they've actually learned about calories that they start now seeing those numbers, and they start going to restaurants they've been to many times before, and they're suddenly, oh my gosh, I didn't know that there was a number on that menu that even told me how many calories was in it. Now they do. That is being calorie conscious. You can make a decision to eat a high calorie meal, that's fine, but you consciously are doing it in the same way that you can make a decision to eat a lower calorie meal, and you're very conscious that you're doing it as well. Being calorie conscious, I think, is less time consuming. Obviously, there's no data input into any tracking devices. It's just kind of more general themes of kind of choosing stuff. It's a lot more flexible as well. So if you don't have your phone, or your time is tight, or you're in a different new location, you can be conscious of the calories either from your previous experience of knowing what types of calories are in which foods, or by looking at packaging and stuff as well. So you can just move this skill set with you without being tied to a phone, basically. It's very good for mindful eating practices. So all the stuff about learning to eat to how you feel, and eat to your hunger cues, and eat to what your body's actually needing fuel-wise. This fits in really nicely into that area. It can fit better into this healthy eating mindset. So I think when you're trying to choose what food you're eating, we shouldn't just be looking at the calorie content. We should be thinking about what nutrients and what vitamins and what minerals and what purpose that food has for our body. So what type of fuel source are we trying to provide our body with? And being aware of the calories within it is just another thing that you're trying to think about when you're looking at healthy eating as a whole. I think it's very good to be calorie conscious when you're trying to eat as part of a family, because a lot of people find when they're on a diet and they're eating a set menu of food or set recipes, it can really conflict with their family life because you're having to create totally separate meals. Being aware of calories with this calorie conscious approach means that you can actually cook meals for your family and just portion them out differently to get the calories that you want out of it, without it being a big deal. So your family don't even need to know that you're actually monitoring the calories in your food, because you're just portioning your meals up differently based on the amount of calories you know might be in mashed potato compared to some broccoli, and the size of the piece of steak that you've had compared to someone else's, type of thing. You can manage that by having an awareness without it having to be a whole new meal. And I think that's very good for the dynamics of eating as a family, but also bring your children up to understand that as well in a healthy mindset, not with strict numbers attached, with strict deadlines, with strict kind of targets you've got to stay within. That links to then quite often would prove to have a lower chance of developing into an eating disorder, or disordered eating, should I say, because there isn't the numbers attached to it. And it's often the numbers attached to it is the thing that people become obsessive over. If you've just got a general awareness of stuff, it's generally a healthier place for you to be. And it's a knowledge bank that grows. So if you constantly are paying attention to how many calories are in stuff, and that starts kind of getting stored in the back of your brain, it's going to grow time after time. So your brain's going to remember stuff that's relevant to it. So it's probably going to remember the calories in 95% of a menu in Wetherspoons if you don't like those foods. But in the foods that you do quite often like in Wetherspoons, for example, it's probably going to remember them. It's going to be like, oh, do you know what? I know that chicken burger dish is about 800 calories, and I know that salad that I quite often like is about 600 calories. And so you'll have those numbers rattling around your head to help make decisions in the future in regards to what you choose, whether you're in that restaurant or whether you're in a restaurant that's selling a similar meal. So that's the types of reasons that I'd say you'd move across. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my car driving navigation analogy because I think it helps make sense of this. So how are you going to stop relying on that sat nav? The sat nav being the calorie counting tool and app of some variety. The first thing you need to do, I'm not going to read this word to word, you can read the analogy as it goes. Basically, you need to take a step back and stop relying on the software. Okay. So if you're in that car, instead of relying on sat nav to get you there, you're going to start actually just paying attention to what's around you. So next time you do that journey, you're going to actually look at where you're turning off. You're going to look at all the landmarks that are there. You're going to look at all the stuff that often has bad traffic. You're going to start paying attention. And that's the same when you're tracking food, is you're not just going to mindlessly just chuck stuff in the app and let it pop up that at the end that you've hit your target. You want to start really tuning in and looking at the ingredients that you're eating, the meals you're eating, seeing what are the low calorie options, seeing what the high calorie options, seeing the ones that are kind of sitting nicely. So the days that you very comfortably hit your calorie target, what are those days actually looking at? Why are those days hitting your target? How are they making you feel? Pay attention to the fact that some days you're finding that target really easy and some days you're finding that target really hard. Is it food choices that you're making? And really start to learn what you're doing. So you're starting to take the reliance off the tracking device. Start looking at menus more, start looking at the calories on those menus, start turning packets of food over and having a look at the actual calories on different ingredients or different meals. So you're starting to get that knowledge bank in your head of understanding roughly what calories are sitting in which things, rather than it just being data on your app. That's step one. Step two, we need to start taking reliance really off that sat nav now, or really off that tracking device. So you can still have it, but we're really going to take a step away from it. So I like to think of it as there, it's just kind of being in the background now, and you're only going to really refer to it if you need it. So a sat nav, turn it on silent. So it's there doing its thing, but you're not relying on it. And I think when it comes to tracking calories, that's what you want to start really looking at. You want to start thinking, can I create this meal without plugging it into my phone? I often think the way to do it is in reverse. So instead of every time you're weighing an ingredient, you're checking on your app how many grams of granola you can have for your breakfast. You pour your granola, you then weigh your granola and see whether it's on par with what you're wanting. And that trial and error process is going to really help. But I said you've still got the software there to refer back to if you need to. Step three is we're removing the software. Okay. So now I like to think about it. If you were driving a car, you didn't have a sat nav, what would you do? Okay. If you're going to go on a long journey, let's write down your plan. You might not need every stage of this. Some of it might already be in the memory, but we're going to write down the whole plan. So you know every junction you need to turn off, every landmark you need to pay attention to, any roadworks you need to pay attention to, all that stuff. Okay, I could go on about this analogy forever. But again, let's move this back to food. What we're going to do, I would create a meal plan that you know is going to fit your target calorie range. So I've done an education session on meal plans before. So if you haven't listened to it, please go and listen to that one. But you're going to create basically a meal plan for the week, for 2 weeks. Make sure all your meals total up to the calorie range that you kind of want to fit in, and giving yourself the allowances of making sure if you do want some sweet treats along the way, you do want some drinks, some alcohol, you've got a big night out here and there, kind of get that all in as well. So you have a plan that you know you can follow, and it's going to do exactly the same as if you were inputting that food data into the tracking app, okay? We're just moving yourself away. So that's the next step. Then we're nearly there. So once you started using that meal plan, you've done it, we're then going to stop using that meal plan, but you're going to keep hold of it. So if you're back in that car journey, you'd still have your route map written down, but keep it in the footwell as a backup if you get lost. Same with the meal plan. It's a backup, but a lot of it should now become second nature. You're starting to understand what your meals are looking like. You know that those meals all are, let's say, roughly 500 calories. So you know that over the day, it's going to keep you about 1,600 calories a day with a couple of snacks. And you can use it then even if you need a backup, which might be if you're extremely busy or you're stressed or your brain's just not working or you just feel a little bit anxious about it, you can put it back out, but it's not there. And it might be you only need it for 1 or 2 days rather than the whole week. And it's also there really good sometimes as support for your family. So if you've got a partner that wants to kind of get involved with the cooking and the shopping, but they don't really know where to start in regards to helping you continue with your goals, you can kind of give them the meal plan as well. So they've got some structure to follow, or your family. So it's good there as a kind of backup to get up to. And the final step is kind of testing yourself on how well you can get on without any of that, but it's following already learning all that. So kind of challenge yourself to kind of see, can you carry on eating the way you want to in line with your goals and in line with your calorie needs by not using calorie tracking and not using the meal plan, but just going through those processes and those steps that you've been building for weeks now. And yeah, trusting yourself on that. And that's what I knew there was a bit more of my analogy. Look around you, because there will be, back to my car journey, road signs everywhere. Follow the signs, follow the menus, follow the calories on the back of the ingredients. I'm not saying you need to somehow magically understand everything without looking, but you don't use your tracking device, you use the information that's around you. Every single food that comes in packaging is going to say calories on it, okay? You can even do a quick Google if you want to, if it's an ingredient that you don't have and you really want some type of guidance, you can do that. That doesn't mean you're tracking your calories. That just means you're increasing your awareness of it. It's no different turning a packet over as Googling the amount of calories on there. You can do that, but what we're trying to take away is the emphasis on needing that information all the time up front. So I said, use the stuff around you that's always going to be around you, that information in regards to calories, rather than having to plan stuff or track stuff as you go. So how to monitor your progress through this? And I say this because most people said they're watching this are probably on a fat loss journey. And the biggest fear on a fat loss journey is generally stopping to lose fat or gaining fat and not reaching your goal. So most of what we talk about here is progress towards a fat loss journey. So we do these steps slowly. If you've been quite reliant on calorie tracking, if you want to kind of go cold turkey straight away, it's fine, but this is the kind of path that I'd follow. You're going to stay at every one of these stages for 3 weeks to get consistent with them and to really monitor whether it's making an impact. So 3 weeks of using your tracking device as backup, okay? So that even means you're using it just to check the odd meals ingredients, or you're completing it in more retrospectively. So it might be you get to the end of the day and you put your meals in, or you get to the end of the meal and you put a meal in, or you do 2 days in a row and put your meals in. But you're not using it ahead proactively to plan exactly what you're eating. You're trusting your instincts and you're using it retrospectively afterwards. But I said, do that for 3 weeks. If you feel like, or especially if you're actually tracking it retrospectively, if you're kind of hitting your numbers and that's been coming from your kind of sense of conscious awareness of what you're eating, let's move to the next stage. where you stop using your tracking device and you create a meal plan. Now that meal plan is basically going to be full of all the foods and all the meals you have been eating probably previous to that, okay? So I always just say here, this is not the time to start trying to create all these new recipes and do everything new, okay? We just want to move what you have been doing, inputting onto the tracking device. We now want to put onto a written plan just to get rid of the tracking device. And then you buy your shopping based on that meal plan and you follow that as much as you can, as close as you can for, again, 3 weeks, okay? That meal plan needs to be calorie counted. So make sure you are actually monitoring your calories on it to start with. From there, if after 3 weeks you're feeling confident, we then move on to what I call being free range. So we're now not using the calorie tracking. We're now not using the meal planning unless you're happy there. And if you're happy there, stay there. But you're not using the meal planning. You're basically now ad hoc going about life. But again, on the basis that you're not experimenting much, you're still staying with the types of foods and the types of portions and the types of everything you've been eating, so you can portion them as you have been, so you can get the same energy levels, the same feedback, all that stuff as you have been. I said, the easiest way to get into that stage is repetition from meals that you've eaten before, okay? And a lot of us will have that. We'll eat the same breakfasts, we'll probably have the same lunches at work. The dinners might vary a little bit, but probably you still only have probably 10 to 12 recipes that you flotate through. So just stick with the ones you know that fit your goals and you're confident portion-wise, you know how to serve up. Then, so there are your 3 stages. With each stage, to check if you're still making progress, we need to monitor it. And if we're talking fat loss, we need to do it through these different measures. We need to do your body stats, which is like your measurements. So if you've been measuring your bust and your waist and your hips and your thighs and your arms, for example, to measure the size of your body, keep doing that at the start of each of this phase. So before you go on to the next phase, you can check your progress. So I suppose in one way you're doing it at the start and the end of the phase, but obviously they'll cross over then as you go through anyway. So start and end of each phase, you need to make sure you're measuring, have you lost weight? Have you stayed the same? Have you gained weight? You also need to do, I said, your weight and progress photos if you can, because all those things together are going to give us the best indication on whether your fat has been changing in percentage or not. If your progress slows or maybe even goes backwards, then stay on the stage you're on. So if you've moved away from calorie tracking and you're on meal planning, but you've started stagnating at meal planning, you don't have to go back and track your meals again. You just need to stick with that meal planning and figure out how to make that work. Figure out what might have gone wrong there. So did you actually not follow the plan to the T? Did you overcalculate or undercalculate the amount of calories that were on your meal plan? Did you have a couple of nights out that you weren't planning and then that meant your average calories over time out? Figure out why the meals that you ate based on your meal plan weren't getting you the same results as the meals that you're eating when you're tracking beforehand. So figure that out, make the adjustments you need to, and then you go again and do that again for 3 weeks until we start getting that downward kind of slope on your fat loss and progress starts to happen again. As I said, move on to the next stage and keep going to get successful. Always keep using food labels and menus to monitor calorie content and staying consciously aware of what calories are in. So this isn't about you tracking every calorie and then 6 months later, never looking at a calorie in your life again. If you're going to try and sustain the body that you're aiming for here, you're going to have to keep some awareness of it. And that's going to need you to constantly look at things occasionally so you know how many calories and stuff, because they will vary. And even if you're talking about lunches at work and you get your meal deal from Tesco's, those options are going to change. So instead of just making a change based on something looking nice, actually maybe make that change based on you also knowing what's actually in it and what's giving to you as well. And that wouldn't just be calories. I'd also chuck in here, I'd always be checking the protein and the fiber levels as well. So you're actually getting a really good idea of the food that you're fueling your body with, not just the amount of calories that you're fueling your body with. While you are being calorie conscious and you're kind of taking that step back in regards to tracking stuff, do you have an idea in your head of roughly how many calories you're trying to get, and then break that number down across your meals. So if I know I'm aiming for about 1,800 calories a day, I know my breakfast is about 400 calories. I know my lunch and my dinner are about 500-600 calories, and that's going to leave about 200 or 300 calories for me to have some snacks and some drinks alongside it. Now those numbers can move slightly, but I know if one goes up, the other one should probably come a bit down. If I have a bigger lunch, I'm going to have a smaller dinner, and vice versa. If I go really big and heavy on my breakfast for some reason, I'm going to then just tone the other ones down throughout the day accordingly. And then my snacks, I'm going to play around with based on actually how I feel, my hunger needs, my energy needs, not just eating them because they fit in my calories or excluding them because they don't fit in my calories. But having that awareness of what numbers you're trying to reach, balance that across the day, is going to really help with those decisions. And think about your calorie intake over time. So not necessarily just day to day, but week to week. That's going to allow you a lot more freedom in regards to your eating habits and your drinking habits. Allow you to have those times where you want to be more social and more generous in regards to your portioning maybe, and kind of the amount of courses of food you're having on dinners out, and then allow you to kind of pull back on other days as well. So last slide here is when to restart calorie counting. And that's a good question. And for some people, it would be never. And for some people, it will be based on these things. So the first time I say is you might want to go back to calorie counting is if your goals change. So either your fat loss goals have changed, or you suddenly have got some new strength and some new fitness goals that might need a higher or a lower calorie count based on what you're trying to achieve. And you kind of need to tune in and re-figure out what foods you can eat to kind of get your calorie counting back, calories back into that target range. You might also want to go back to calorie counting if you feel like there's a loss of control. And people often find this, if they've been heavily reliant on calorie counting and then they move away from it, it can feel like you kind of lost your right limb type of thing because you've been so reliant on it. And sometimes stepping back to it, even in the little moderate form, can maybe help you feel in more control. And there might be a few weeks down the line, you built that trust in yourself again, and you can move back away from it. So if you feel that real negative impact of stepping away from it, and you feel like you've lost control and it's really impacting your progress because of the feelings you're feeling rather than the actual physical outcome of it, feel free to go back and give it a go again, knowing that you're going back just to do it with a light touch, really. You might want to go back to calorie counting for a bit of extra accountability, and that's a very good and common way that it sometimes happens. So let's say you've gone on holiday, you've been on holiday for 2 weeks, you haven't really thought at all about your eating when you're over there, you've just kind of had the best time enjoying all the foods on offer, which has been fine. You come back, do you know what, I just need a bit of a refocus. And the way I'm going to refocus is give myself an accountability. I'm going to be strict on my calories, I'm going to track my calories. And then once I've got things moving again, once progress is happening, I can step away. So accountability could be really good in those kind of circumstances. Or maybe you've got kind of a short time frame that you've got a quite big goal for. And again, a short-term calorie counting is going to keep you very fixed and get you there quicker than kind of free reining it a little bit. Another reason I would maybe restart calorie counting is if there's been quite a big change in your lifestyle, and that change in lifestyle can impact your total daily energy expenditure. So remembering that kind of calorie counting all comes down to kind of that difference between your calories in against your calories out. If your calories out has changed, you might then need to change your calories in to fit it, to still keep your goals. So things like becoming a parent. So not only might you have the extra weight of kind of carrying the baby that you want to lose, but also the lifestyle choice that comes with. So suddenly you maybe not at work, maybe you sat at home a lot more, maybe the recovery from birth has been really physically challenging, and so you're kind of really restricted on what you can do exercise wise. So that might impact it. You might have changed your workplace. You might have gone from a relatively active job to a really sedentary job. You might be working from home a lot more. You might have moved house, and it might be that you used to be able to go out for lots of long walks around the streets where you live, and now you're in the countryside and the pitch black, and you now can't go for walks in the evening. So your step counts come down a lot. It might be your travel arrangements have changed. So it might be you used to walk or cycle places, and now you've got a car, so you're driving places. So any of those things might be impacting your non-exercise and your exercise activity thermogenesis, lowering or maybe increasing how many calories you're burning every day, which then means we need to adjust the calories that you're intaking. And I said, doing that through calorie counting is going to be the most accurate way that Joe Public have got to monitor your progress in regards to meeting those goals. There might be a change to your BMR, so that's your basal metabolic rate. So that's the one that we don't have that much influence on because most of it's made up with our body size based on our height and our weight and our age and our gender. But your health conditions can play quite a part into what your BMR is, should I say. So if you have had quite a change in your health conditions and your BMR has dropped, which some medications can do, again, that's going to bring down your whole total daily energy expenditure. And again, if we're trying to create fat loss on there, it might be we then need to lower your calorie intake, which might be why you need to track your calories again. And the last one on it can be a change in your eating habits. And this is quite common if people have changed to being vegetarian or vegans, or maybe have had to bring in some dietary requirements like being a celiac. That can really change the makeup of the foods that you've been eating, and the calories within them can then change quite rapidly. Not only is the actual total volume of calories in them, but also the thermic effects, the amount of calories that are getting burnt through eating and digesting that food can change. So it might be if you, as I said, are changing eating style patterns, whether you have to for health or you wanted to for other reasons, you might want to retrack those calories so you actually understand what's in your new diet of foods that you're eating, and then you can work from there. By introducing calorie counting again, you will get a better understanding, as I said, of your calorie needs across the board. So finding out what your total daily energy expenditure is quite a hard thing to find, especially because it fluctuates every day. But if you know that you're not putting on weight long term and you're staying very static on the scales and very static in regards to your body size, you know that you're probably eating at that level. So if you count your calories that you're eating and your weight's not changing, you know it's basically what your total daily energy expenditure is as well. And that's quite a nice number to know when you're trying to lose fat, because you know your starting point. So I said tracking calories without even a desire for fat loss, but just a desire to see where your energy expenditure is roughly, can be a great tool as well. So that's it. So that is our education session in regards to being calorie conscious. I said it's the way of stepping away from counting calories so you can continue on your fat loss journey, or you can maintain the stage that you've got to on your fat loss journey without having to always rely on calorie counting tracking devices for the rest of your life, which I'm pretty sure 99.9% of people are not going to want to do long term. Okay, so give it a go. Have confidence in your ability to make positive, correct decisions based on the knowledge that you gained through all the awareness you've given yourself in regards to how many calories are in foods. But I said the first step is just to slowly step away from it, using that calorie tracking device as an education tool, and then start paying attention to those numbers, and then have the confidence to give it a go yourself. You will be surprised how well you do, and just have the confidence in knowing you have got to overconsume your foods probably 100 to 200% per day to really be putting on a significant amount of noticeable weight. Okay, so even if there's a few inaccuracies to start with, over time, your body is the product of its average actions, its average eating actions, its average moving actions. So the odd higher calorie overestimation here and there is not going to make a difference. All right, good luck. Any questions, let me know. Take care.